If someone's new to dissociative identity disorder, what are the common signs and how would you define it for someone who's never heard of it before?
Well, it's been defined more or less the same way for 100 and something years, 130, 40. Uh, so it's the existence of one person of two or more identities, personalities, parts, as different names are used. And those parts are very separate and distinct, usually have their own names and ages, talk different, act different, have different memories. And they come out to the surface, take control of the person. And there's different degrees of amnesia. Either the regular person is sort of in the back, kind of watching, or further back and fogged out, or all the way gone.
Mm.
So then there's periods of missing time because the other parts have been out and in control. And then um, there's 2 points. One is that's on a spectrum, like most mental health disorders. You can have no drinking problem, drink a little bit of wine, the occasional beer, more, 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 more. And at some point, it becomes a big problem at the
Yeah.
extreme. Same for depression, same for anxiety. So DID is also on a spectrum. So I
Mm.
call it either the dissociative spectrum or the inner child spectrum.
Mm.
So at the left hand end, there's no inner child at all. It's just a metaphor. It just means unresolved feelings from childhood, which we all have. So therefore, we all have an inner child. And then it's like, no, I don't have an inner child, but I kind of feel like some of those old feelings, kind of like there's somebody there, but not really. And then, yeah, I can sense a little girl. She's 7 years old. She's upset. She's crying. And then it goes, I can visualize that child internally. She talks to me. I talk to her. She kind of comes out near the surface, but not all the way. But then I start to feel like I'm a little girl myself, probably having a flashback or upset. And then it's, as I described, 2/3 of the way out, the regular person's now shifting into the back all the way out. So everybody's on that spectrum somewhere.
Mm.
And once you're kind of like 2/3, 3/4 of the way out that spectrum, the treatment is really all the same, which is helping the parts to get to know each other, work together as a team, stop the internal civil war, share memories, thoughts, feelings, and gradually either partially or fully blend back together into one.
Mm.
So that if you just think it's not literally a different person. It's all parts of one person. But if you think there's one or more people inside, they come out, take over, and there's amnesia, then all the symptoms follow logically. Not counting drugs, alcohol, no head injury. Um, I have these chunks of missing time. And it's not just like 30 seconds while I'm driving. It's 15 minutes, an hour, a couple hours, sometimes a day or two.
Wow.
And I don't know what happened. And then it's sometimes I come to and I'm in a location. I don't know how I got there. And it could be just the local shop, or it could be any place, or it could be somewhere I would never go. Then people tell me about stuff that I've done that I don't remember. People describe me acting different during times I don't remember, like I'm either really angry, really scared, I'm the life of the party. Um, I find objects present and I don't know how they got there. It's not just like a pen or a little piece of paper. Um, Common one is I open my closet and there's 3 sets of clothing there. So this is a 30-something-year-old woman. They're not a style I would normally wear at all. They're like teenage clothing. The 3 sizes too small. I don't know how they got there. But then there's the shopping bag in the bottom with the receipt. It's my credit card. Signature kind of looks like me. So finding objects present like that. Objects missing, which is not just losing a pen, or it's a large object which nobody else stole.
Yeah.
Samples of handwriting you don't remember doing can be very similar to your own handwriting, all the way to drastically different, like block printing or slanted the opposite direction. And often in the printing or cursive writing, which hardly anybody knows how to do anymore, um, could be talking about she this and she that. So talking about the person in the third person. and then voices in your head talking, arguing, commenting, which that also is on a spectrum from thoughts to full voices. So if you have quotes voices, but they're very, very, very quiet, they seem more like thoughts.
Mm.
So I always say there's two dials. There's a volume dial and an ego alien dial, which means how much it doesn't feel like it's you.
Yeah.
If you turn the volume all the way down, it seems more like a thought than a voice. If you turn the ego alien dial all the way down, then it's just you thinking.
Mm.
But if you turn both those dials all the way up, then it's an out loud voice inside your head. I wouldn't say that. I can't control it. I can't turn it on or off. And these darn voices talk to each other,
Yeah.
basically what it looked like.
How is it possible that, so like, what happens in the brain for there to be such long memory gaps up to a day? Because I wasn't unaware that that was a part of the disorder.
Uh, and you can ask any mental health symptom or any diagnosis. There's a few theories, but nobody has the faintest idea how the brain does that.
Yeah.
Like,
And
how does the brain make you say something out loud? We know a certain amount about that, but basically how the brain generates conscious thought, nobody has the faintest idea.
yeah, yeah. And is that only the case in sufferers of DID, or is there other disorders that have that amnesia as well?
Well, it's always no brain injury. It's not because you're drunk or stoned or you have brain disease. And if you have amnesia, and we're not just talking like little blip of 10 seconds, um, by definition, it's dissociative amnesia equals psychological amnesia. Therefore, it's a dissociative disorder. So some people just have blocked out, you know, like they were assaulted 3 years ago. They don't remember 3 or 4 hours, or they don't remember age 9 to 12 when really bad stepdad was living in the home.
Mm.
Uh, so it's clearly not normal forgetting.
Mm.
You don't remember stuff before 9 and then after 12 and zero from 9 to 12. Um, and then the blank spells could be yesterday or last week or the week before. So it's just by definition, it's psychological equals dissociative amnesia, which is its own diagnosis in a
Mm.
group called dissociative disorders.
Oh,
And then
okay.
if you have full DID, then it's DID. Dissociative Identity Disorder became the official name in 1994, previously multiple personality
Yeah.
disorder, which is the same thing. Um, if you have kind of like the 2/3, 3/4 of the way up the spectrum, then it's got a ridiculous name, other specified dissociative disorder.
What?
The American Psychiatric Association makes up ridiculous names, which just means DID 3/4 as much.
Yeah.
And then there's depersonalization derealization disorder. This is in an official manual of the American Psychiatric, which is also, they're all similar or exactly the same in ICD-11, which was the World Health Organization. So depersonalization is disconnection from yourself. You don't feel like you're quoting your body. Your body seems strange, unfamiliar. It's like you're a step back, but there's no amnesia. There's no voices. And derealization is when the outside world seems not real, in a dream, in a fog, you're disconnected. So you can have just depersonalization, derealization disorder, just dissociative amnesia, or a combination of all kinds of dissociative symptoms, half, 2/3, all the way on the spectrum.
Mm. And is that
Now you're
probably,
educated.
was that, sorry?
Now you're fully educated.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, there's so many different ones. I didn't know there was that many, to be fair. What causes that? You mentioned childhood, the example of 9 to 12. Is this a defense mechanism from a traumatic part of one's childhood, usually the amnesia and the dissociation, the derealization?
Yeah. Nothing's 100% of the time. There's always exceptions, but huge majority of the time, once you're, if it's just pure dissociative amnesia, it's usually some traumatic event. Who wants to remember that or know that or feel that? And again, how the brain does that exactly, we don't know. But the information's not gone. It's in your brain somewhere. And it can be pretty well blocked out, but then say you're in America would be a blue baseball cap. Your uncle always had a blue baseball cap on when he was molesting you. Some person walked by with a blue baseball cap on. All of a sudden you have a flashback, see it, you're in it, you feel it. But before it was sort of stuffed down inside. Well, that's a form of dissociation.
Mm.
And dissociation goes in both directions. It's tucked away in some other part of your psyche, so it's dissociated. Then it erupts and comes back, and then it's pushed down again. So it's
Mm.
an up-down process.
Mm.
And in the course of treatment, the good part of treatment is you improve. The bad part is then all these feelings come up, you've got to deal with them.
Yeah.
It's like the dissociation is the gift and the curse at the same time.
Mm. Why is that? Why is that so? Is it because it just comes back and then goes again, then comes back and goes again?
Yeah, so it's very disruptive. So it's good. The association is great because you don't have to feel that and all that, put it on the back burner, carry on with your life more successfully. It's bad because it doesn't work perfectly. And you got
Mm.
PTSD, all these intrusions, flashbacks, terrible feelings coming up in a rush.
Mm. And I've heard the term alter. How would
Mm.
you define that for someone that doesn't know what an alter is?
So there's all kinds of names. And even in the professional literature, people have, I don't know if I call them debates, but just calm shouting matches. Uh, this term is allowed and this term is no good. We say this and we don't say that. I'm like eclectic. So there are these different dissociated parts. Uh, in the literature, there were alter personalities, sort of like getting a little politically incorrect for no solid reason. But now it's identity states, dissociated identity states, dissociated parts of the person. And the people who don't care about the professional literature call their parts, voices, other parts of me, peeps, littles. They have a whole bunch of terms. So alter equals alter personality is just one of the terms.
Mm.
So those terms don't mean different things. They're just different words for the same thing.
Yeah. And is there common alternate personalities that you've seen among people that you've treated or spoke to and worked with?
Now, there's two, they're both published at in 1989. So one was a study by me, one by Frank Putnam, who was a big feature in the field, and surveyed a whole bunch of people with multiple personalities. Um, by definition, they all have multiple personalities. That's why they're in the survey. So 2/3 had a multiple personality of the opposite gender. Um, 2/3 have an multiple personality it's a different age, including a child alter personality. So the basic configurations is there's the adult self, who's only one of the parts. Often the adult self who's out front is called the host personality, just because we have to have some name. So, and the host personality by definition is out front most of the time, taking care of life in general. And the host personality could have been the same since childhood, or whoever was the host just got totally burned out and didn't want to deal with it anymore. Somebody else took over as host 3 years ago.
Mm.
Sometimes there's kind of a small team that cooperate together to do the host functions. And then sometimes it's just chaos. But usually there's the host personality. And then there's a child alter. And all these things are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 of them. And the child can hold no trauma awareness and just spontaneous and happy and enjoys life,
Mm.
or can be holding tons of trauma, PTSD, and then gets triggered, gets hyper aroused, and all that floods into the host, equals PTSD. Then there's persecutor personalities, which are parts that are, I hate you, it's your fault, I'm going to cut on you, kill you, trash talk you. And then there's protector parts who are the opposite, so the protector and the persecutor can have conversations inside and shouting matches and she's no good, and leave her alone, back and forth. Um, and then it's just endless variety of different names, ages, sort of sub functions in those categories. And it
Hmm.
can be so none of it's literally real. It's not literally different people there. So some people have parts that are animals or parts that are mythical characters, or occasionally a part that's modeled on some celebrity. But usually it's just, sort of regular people with different names and ages. So that
Hmm.
the an adult who takes care of all the mother and wife functions. And then there can be the free loving party teenager. And there can be, if it's a biological female, like big, tough, strong, scary male who comes out, takes care of business.
Hmm.
Well, a lot of it just, if your mind was going to create parts to help you survive, what kind of parts would it create?
Hmm.
Big, strong, tough male, like be handy to have around.
Hmm. And is it often the switching between them? Is it often spontaneous, or is it actually always triggered by something like you said about the baseball cap? Can it literally be you're just talking to them and then suddenly they switch?
Yes. It's a both. So when we're out in the world in general, so it doesn't have to be a PTSD scary trigger. It can just be this situation calls for the mother part.
Hmm.
Like we have to go pick up our child at school. So they'll just shift in and out. And then the puzzle is, how is that exactly controlled and regulated?
Yeah.
How does the mind know it's time for the part to come out? And sometimes
Hmm.
it's obvious. Well, okay, so time to go pick up the kid. So the pick up the kid part comes out. And sometimes there's somebody inside and kind of monitors and controls all of that. And sometimes it's just that's the way it works.
Hmm.
And there's not anybody deciding, okay, we're going to send so and so out.
Hmm.
It's a combination of all of that.
Yeah. How can it be disruptive for the person who has this and their loved ones? And is it always do people with DID always struggle with forming relationships? Because you just mentioned picking up the kids. So there's clearly people with DID are able to have children and have long-term relationships, which is obviously a good thing. But what is the prevalence from the experience that you've had of people with DID? How many of them can form long-term stable relationships?
Well, so I personally, clinically, we see a select subgroup, which is people who come for treatment. Right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
The serial killers in jail, we don't tend to see them in the outpatient clinic, right?
Yeah, true.
Or the people who are dead, who are homeless, or such horrible drug and alcohol problems, they can't get anywhere near therapy.
Mm.
So again, it's highly variable, huge range. And the high functioning end is, well, people who are like doctors, lawyers, functioning in the workplace. And then things get a little shaky in the evening because the party part comes out and goes
Mm.
or um, in terms of family life, again varies from the kids have no idea to the kids actually know some of mom's parts by name. And then that turns into they like this part because she's easy to manipulate and they can get whatever they want. And then the husband can be, and it's all combinations of male, female, straight, gay, but I'll just use male, female example. So the husband uh, really likes the sex addict part, knows her name, and calls her out because he wants to have sex with her. And which could be okay, or it could be very manipulative.
Yeah.
And the wife mother part doesn't want that to happen at all.
Mm.
So again, the quality of the spouse, as in life in general, varies from great to horrible.
Mm.
And I've certainly met like bunches of people who, before the DID was ever diagnosed, they knew some parts by name, or if they didn't know them by name, they go, she's just like a different person. Like she's yelling, screaming, hates me, throwing things. And normally she's so kind and nice. So the family often know parts by description. They just said something's going on, but I don't know what it is.
Mm.
Sometimes they actually know parts by name. And most often when you talk with spouse, whoever, adult children. Like, we don't explain it to 4-year-olds, obviously. Um, they'll go, "Oh, that totally makes sense." That's the most common response.
Yeah.
Based on the person didn't know they had DID, they weren't claiming they had DID, and they never were told they have DID. Before diagnosis, you usually get that kind of history.
Yeah. Yeah. And mentioning like alcohol, for example, there's always these examples of people who switch under the influence of alcohol. I remember Jim Morrison from The Doors was the nicest person
Right.
sober, and then he would have a drink and he would become the complete opposite. And you mentioned earlier that it's a spectrum. Um, what's the fundamental difference between that and someone with clinical DID? Is someone that changes under the influence of alcohol still on the spectrum, or is it a separate thing to DID?
And you should ask somebody who knows the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Like, in a way, nobody knows, right?
Yeah.
Of how it works and exactly how common it is. But there's all variations on that too. So there's somebody without DID who just gets all flipping drunk and passes out. So they have amnesia, more mystery.
Yeah.
But they're just sort of a jollier version of themselves when they're drunk. Uh, and then there's the person who, Jim Morrison and 2 million other people who just like King Kong comes out and they're angry and they're horrible and nasty. And then when they're next morning, they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't me." They don't mean it wasn't me literally, just a way of talking. Then there's people who have alcohol blackouts. So an alcohol blackout is not you had so much you passed out. It's like after a drink or two, poof, there's an amnesia spell.
Wow.
It's not the direct chemical effect of the alcohol.
Yeah.
But in the alcohol literature, that's usually thought to be, alcohol's damaged your brain. So it's an alcohol brain damage phenomenon. But quite a long time ago, I was talking to somebody about their alcohol blackouts. And she explains, "Yeah, sometimes I black out before I have anything to drink." Wait,
Yeah.
that was somebody who turned out with DID who had,
Yeah.
or who really liked to drink. So it all depends like who you talk to and who you're talking about. There's all variations, but it's always a question mark suspicion. How far out the dissociative spectrum is somebody who is like a totally different person while they're drunk? Is it really the alcohol causing a single person to behave that way? Or is an alcohol, because basically alcohol anesthetizes your brain, right? Anesthetizes your anxiety, your inhibitions, your ability to drive a car, and then your ability to speak, and then your ability to stay awake. So it kind of anesthetizes your defenses and your inhibitions, and another part of you that's kept down emerges,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
I would guess. So I don't have like research data. I have lots of research data, but not on this question. What percentage of people who become another person when they're drunk actually have a full dissociative disorder?
Mm.
It's going to be a bunch.
Yeah.
That's my best estimate, a bunch.
Yeah. And you said that the brain is a mystery, and I've had a cognitive scientist on who completely agrees with that. And the consciousness thing is a whole other can of worms that I'd love to explore in the future. But
Yeah, I've actually written about that.
have
Mine.
you?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. What kind of things did you write about on that topic?
Uh,
Wait, hold that thought. I'm genuinely so grateful that you've stuck around with us to listen to these fascinating insights from the guest so far. If this episode has given you one piece of knowledge which has helped you understand yourself and the world a little bit better than before, the absolute best way to support us is to pay it forward and hit the share button right now. Don't let this knowledge stay hidden. Please send it to one person who will benefit from this episode. Thank you so much. Let's dive back into the rest of the episode.
with a whole range of things, but so ultra quick. So there's the one paper in particular, which I could email you. So there's the origin of the universe, 13.8 billion years ago, or whatever it was. Then there's the origin of life on Earth, a billion years ago, or whatever it is. And then there's the origin of consciousness. And So if you listen to what you can't do anymore since he died, Stephen Hawking, who's a very militant, obviously like incredibly brilliant theoretical physicist, but a pretty militant, unkind, unfriendly philosopher. So he's a militant atheist. So he says, before the Big Bang, there was nothing.
Mm.
And then nothing blew up, which is a completely preposterous idea. Nothing can't blow up. And lots of our professors and everybody says that, but then they kind of fudge it over. Well, there was actually a quantum fluctuation. Well, okay. Well, you're so smart. I don't even know what a quantum fluctuation.
Yeah.
Like nothing can't fluctuate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
basically, nobody has the faintest idea how the universe could come from nothing. And it doesn't make any logical sense at all. So that's the emergence of the universe. Then we get the emergence of life a billion years ago. So from a atheist, pretty good chunk of academic scientist point of view, there's no soul, there's no spirit, there's no life after death. That's a bunch of superstition. All those religious people. But we're the scientists. And we know that in science, you don't talk about that stuff. And, I have quotes from Nobel laureates saying things like that. We don't need any like supernatural explanation. It's just the brain. And consciousness emerges from the brain. Okay, so the universe emerged from nothing. Life emerged from the ocean. And consciousness emerges from the brain. And we know that because we're scientists. And, well, okay. So this is the animate, inanimate matter distinction. Some matter is dead. Some matter is alive. Which in one sense is it's obvious, right? If life equals biological life, well, your headphones are not biologically alive. It's obvious. Nobody's going to debate that. But then it gets brought into there's no spirit, there's no soul, there's no life after death. So then I tell the story of the iron atom. So there's a pregnant woman who had anemia. We're going off track for a little while here, but I won't.
That's fine. Keep going. Keep going.
So there's an iron atom in the ground. All scientists are agreed it's dead. Nobody says, well, that it might be wiggling. So it's dead. So then it's mined, it's refined, it's put in a prescription bottle, it's sitting at the pharmacy. Well, a woman with anemia goes and gets the iron prescription, takes it home. Iron atoms are still dead. She swallows them. All the iron, it's the same if it's a billion atoms or one atom. So the iron atom's going down her esophagus, still dead, still dead, still dead. Now it gets absorbed into her bloodstream. Now it gets incorporated into her hemoglobin. And now it's alive because the woman's alive and her body's alive. So the atoms in her body have to be alive. So this iron atom life emerged somehow. And it's an interesting theological story because the iron atom has a reincarnation cycle. Because the red blood cell only lasts for about 100 days or so. Then it dies, the hemoglobin's broken down, the iron atom goes back in the ground. But then somebody digs that iron atom up, and it gets prescribed to another woman. So it was dead, then it became alive. Now it's dead again. Then it's going to become alive again, which is preposterous. So the distinction between animate and inanimate matter makes no logical sense. If there is no life force or life spirit or something that isn't just a bunch of dead atoms, because how do dead atoms become alive? Well, that happened a billion years ago in the ocean when some atoms joined together and there was some new biochemistry and all of a sudden the first living thing. But how do dead atoms become alive?
Yeah.
What is this alive property? When you disallow some separate life force or life spirit. So it's completely logically contradictory. Science just covers it over with, oh, well, it was an event at the bottom of the ocean and they talk about the temperature and the carbon and the oxygen. But this fundamental, nobody has the faintest idea problem at the core of it just gets fudged over. And it's the same with mind and brain. Your elbow's not allowed to be conscious, right? And I'm confident that your elbow is not having thoughts about U.S. foreign policy today. So that's true. So only part of your conscious. So this down here in your brainstem, that's not conscious. That's just automatic regulation of this, that, and the other. So only part of your brain up here somewhere is conscious. Okay, so how are some atoms in your, or some electricity, or some neurons, or something in your brain, how are some of them conscious when some aren't? Well, that's because consciousness is the emergent property of the electricity and chemistry of the brain. So we're back to consciousness emerges in the lower fidus, and you're just some silly person who was superstitious. But nobody has the faintest idea how consciousness emerges from the atoms and the electricity of the brain. So that's that's what that writing is about.
It seems like there's a lot of missing gaps, or one fundamental missing thread
Right.
that ties everything together still.
Right.
Like the Big Bang doesn't.
The same logical fallacy. We have no idea how it works, so we'll just say it's an emergent property.
Yeah.
And that's a big word, so we're smart.
Yeah. What does emergent property even mean?
Who knows? But in actual science, like dew emerges on the grass in the morning, right? Or water emerges from the hose. Things emerge all the time, but we've got full scientific understanding of that. So things do emerge, but how does the mind emerge?
Yeah. How do we know what's conscious and what isn't conscious in terms of like animals as well? Like we just think all animals don't think.
Right.
Feel.
Well, that's a militant ideology of academics at universities who are a bunch of academic eggheads who live in their heads and are disconnected from their own bodies. I would.
Yeah.
Because it's monstrous. I mean, I remember actually it was when I lived in England back in the 60s. I was walking around in Somerset, and I come to a clearing, and just on the near side of the clearing, there's a rabbit. And on the far side of the clearing, which was maybe 10, 15 meters, it wasn't a very big clearing, there was a pheasant sitting there. And a rabbit. Oh, a pheasant. And the rabbit crouches down and goes and runs under the pheasant's tail. And the pheasant goes, look. So it's like the rabbit, a prankster.
Yeah.
Right? Which is just multiply that by every time you've ever done any interaction with a cat or a dog. It's obvious that animals have consciousness. And there's a couple good books about that. When Elephants Weep is one. Going into all kinds of detail about biology and examples, and ravens can count, and they hide something, go back and get it a year later. Elephants all get together and have basically a wake for a dead elephant. All kinds of social rituals and so on. But then the science, well, that's just automatic, programmed behavior. Sort of like your being.
Yeah.
Jacob, you little scientist.
Yeah. And I suppose some elephants get drunk on like fermented apples as well. And there's just so many examples of things that seem a bit too.
There's where I used to live near Dallas. Before I actually was born in Canada, grew up in Canada, in Texas. We were out at a little local winery, and the guy who owned it was an American Airlines pilot, so he had all kinds of interesting stories. And it was just a small winery, and we got to tour and see the bottling and everything. He said similar thing when I forget which kind of berry it was, but some berry that grows on a plant there. When it gets overripe and the birds eat it, they're like flying around crazy patterns. They're drunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I might open a treatment center for those birds.
Yeah. That'd be pretty good. The thing is, I'm pretty sure they can somewhat detect that it's overripe. I've seen blackbirds in the bush, like observing and deciding whether they're going to eat a berry. They'll put it in their mouth, taste it, and spit it out if it's not right.
Yeah.
What was that, sorry?
This one's useless.
Yeah, exactly. But then they clearly, I don't know if birds do that, but like what you said, they must have some sort of way to, if their flying patterns going crazy, they clearly do get drunk. So they must be able to, I don't know, consciously, but have some sort of executive function where they can be like, oh, this is overripe. This is probably going to make me feel nice. And especially the elephants as well. So yeah,
Well,
it's silly to think that
you're
animals that
reminding
aren't
me of
conscious in some regard.
brambles in Somerset in the fall. You have brambles and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
bramble bushes, yeah. So it's the same kind of problem. Endlessly, it's just variations on the same problem. Like, okay,
Mm,
how does consciousness emerge from the brain? No idea whatsoever. Why do you
mm,
not allow consciousness to emerge from the brains of animals? What chimpanzees and humans share 97% of their DNA. It's all just silly. It doesn't make any sense. But
do you
it's,
think it's,
you know, serious academics say all this stuff.
yeah. Do you think it's more of a communication problem than a consciousness problem, like, or not non-conscious, unconscious problem between humans and other animals?
Well, humans and animals do communicate all the time, just not in English.
Mm,
Who doesn't communicate with their dog? Everybody
yeah,
does.
true.
It's just like porpoises communicate with each other, bees communicate with each other. So communication doesn't have to be, on radio stations communicate with each other, but the antenna is not talking out loud in words. So there's a bazillion forms of communication. When you share them all, right? Birds communicating with each other because I've got all these bright colors and I'm a male. Hey, come on over. There's a bazillion ways to send messages.
Mhm.
Drumming in America, with native people used to have smoke signals. So there's no end to it,
Mm,
right?
yeah. I just meant like, so maybe this people or scientists just think animals aren't conscious because we can't talk English to them. And if animals could talk English, it would somehow mean that we understand them better and therefore know if they're conscious or not. Like rather than, but that isn't a reason why they're not conscious, right? Just because we can't communicate English with them doesn't mean they can't think for themselves.
So some, like parrots and other species, have vocabularies larger than a 2-year-old child.
Wow.
Literally have hundreds of words vocabulary and speak in sentences and make comments on things.
Mm.
And the comments not just random; it's tied
Mm.
into what's going on.
Also, it's contextual. Wow. So
It
what the
looks
scientists say that's automatic.
well. Again, it doesn't make any sense. And how did that capacity evolve in the parrot's brain? Parents weren't learning how to speak English, well, for the last 2 million years. They just learn it like a kid goes to school and learns English.
Mm.
And parrot in another country is talking in a different language. So it's not like they have the gene for speaking a certain language.
Mm.
It's really learning.
Yeah.
Well, then you say, well, it's automatic. What do you mean it's automatic?
How come parrots can actually do that and other birds can't? Is that just an error in their brain that allows them?
See, that's me. I don't know.
Yeah, I should try and get someone on the show who might know something about it, but you
Yeah,
never know. The brain.
study all that in great detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
The obvious thing
So,
is they can.
yeah. It's not spoken about enough though, because I completely forgot parrots can do that until you just reminded me. It's like actually
Well,
baffling.
porpoise and whales, they all have a wide array of sounds they use for signaling.
Mm. Can they communicate with each other, like
Yeah.
between species? Really?
Oh, between species, whales and dolphins, I don't know about that. But
Mm.
dolphins with dolphins, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that baffles me is the migration of birds. How can a bird go from West Africa to the same spot in Sussex every year?
Incredible. But there's actually, I've written about this too a little bit, because I'm interested in electromagnetic field interactions between people and people and the environment. And there's like locked down scientific evidence that uh, certain birds, well, sharks, rays, actually some bacteria use the Earth's magnetic field for navigation.
Mm.
And there's experiments where people put magnets just like on a little attachment on the homing pigeon's head, and it can't find its way home anymore.
Wow.
Take it off and it's fine because they're using the magnetic field for navigation. And the bacteria that do that, uh, it's all got to do with they have iron, whatever molecule is in their body. And so it's the iron tracking the magnetic field somehow.
Mm.
But then how does that work?
Yeah. How does that work? Is it automatic, or can they see the see the lines or feel the lines? It's
Maybe a bit of
how does a magnetic field? Does a magnetic field vary in location,
Yeah.
depending on where you are?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Ah.
Areas. So the things are the, the molten aspect of the inner core of the Earth, which is flowing, that generates a magnetic field. The sun, there's local geomagnetic phenomena, um, like a big iron deposit or something. The solar wind, the radiation belts around the Earth. There's a bunch of different sources of different types of magnetic field.
And how does this relate to human communications and behaviors?
In another topic. So I think that human beings are biological cell phones and measurable, not some mysterious quotes life force. Because I think that the light force and electromagnetic field are the same thing, just talked about in a different way. We have technology for measuring one. When we're talking about it in this vocabulary, we're superstitious numbskulls. The one we're being scientists, but it's just the same thing. And so then there's a whole bunch of assumptions and predictions and et cetera that follow from that way of thinking. But basically, when you're feeling the vibe, you're literally monitoring the electromagnetic field that's just under threshold of consciousness or just sort of way. And when somebody's got good energy, they literally have good energy. And then that's a whole
It's not.
another hour to discuss that.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yes, so okay, so this is just unscientific mysticism, right? We could measure the difference between ultra personalities and somebody with DID using a DID energy scanner. So most scientists are going to go, come on, these DID people are all nuts. Okay, well, here's a very mystical kooky claim. I say that I can detect the electromagnetic field of the heart by taking the EKG. But we already measure the electric field of the human body, EKG, EEG, and nothing mystical about it, perfectly scientific. So there's non-contact electrodes. There's actually some, I'm not sure if they're still active, but they were at the University of Sussex, I think it was. And then they were funded electrical engineer guys and publishing in mainstream journals. They were taking an EKG from a meter away from a person with no physical contact with the body, full clinical grade EKG, because that signal goes out into the world. And low frequency, extra low frequency, like brainwaves, it gets propagated out thousands of miles, kilometers, without the intensity dropping off, because the waves are like so long.
What, from the brain?
Any ultra low frequency energy, whether it's from a radio transmitter or from the brain. So that's just a known physics property, but there's a thing called the inverse square law with high levels of frequency, the signal drops off pretty rapidly with distance. But extra low frequency doesn't drop off like that, which is interesting. Okay, so your brain waves are going to Moscow, but in a more local sort of region, my theory is that these are actual real signals, which they are. They've evolved over the last gazillion billion years, and the ability to sense them, detect them, it's probably had some sort of survival advantage. So it's been selected for. An example is um, electromagnetic energy coming out of your eye. So this is going to cycle around to DID in a minute. So if you know John Locke, who's an English philosopher from hundreds of years ago, he said that there's no extramission, no energy coming out of the eye. There's just intramission, which is energy comes in your eye and your retina processes it. So extramission has been disallowed by mainstream science for hundreds of years. And not like we're willing to talk about it. No, it doesn't happen. Anybody who thinks it does is a nut. And so, again, we just look at the basic logic. Okay, we put a EEG electrode on your head. We have to have some pace so there's good conduction. But that signal left your brain, went through the skull and got to your skin before it acted. Well, why do we think it stops there? It all of a sudden goes, and like the skin, I'm stalking. And then we got little ears who can pick up an EKG from a meter away, or they can do 2 meters, 10 meters. It's just the sensitivity of the electrode. So I actually have a publication where there's normal EEG electrodes on, and then there's this special electrode that's in front of my eye, and it's inside a goggle that's got a copper mesh and tinfoil. You need like a $30 grant in order to do this research. And so that electrode's making no contact with my body at all. And there's a control electrode hanging in front of the goggles just in space. And it's just random background noise. There's all the regular EEG pattern. And the electrode that's hanging here, same pattern. There's electrodes in your forehead.
Wow.
Showing that, hello, why are the brainwaves going to stop when they get to your pupil? They don't. So there is extramission. So I've basically proven that, published it in Electrical Engineering Journal, where it's since been completely ignored. But there's nothing mystical or weird about it. And so there is a signal. The question is, okay, well, we could study that. Does that signal have any environmental function? Can people detect it? And then we've got the evil eye, which is people can send a curse by staring at you, which may or may not be true. But obviously people have had this idea that your stare goes out into the world. So then there's a bunch of superstition wrapped around that. But then we reject the whole thing. We don't go, well, maybe there's a core physiological reality if we unpack the superstition.
Yeah.
And so then the theory is, well, this would have been selected for, for hundreds, however, millions of years out in the plains of Africa, because the gazelle that's happily munching away and senses the stare of the lion or the tiger, it's going to get evil eye sickness. The evil eye sickness are something's wrong, scared, impending danger, nausea. And even if it's subliminal and unconscious, the genes for sensing that signal are going to be selected for because the animal's going to run away.
Yeah.
And the other guys are just going, well, it's a nice day, I'll keep eating. So then this all becomes researchable. So what's the frequency of the energy? What's the amplitude? Well, already published it. It's just regular brain waves. So we could create a gun that, just like a laser, but it does extra low frequency brainwave level of energy. And then we could shoot somebody with that gun when the intensity is turned way, way down, they wouldn't feel anything. And then we turn the amplitude, the intensity up, not to the level where we want a hole on their head, but just a level where anybody can walk. Oh yeah, well, I feel it right here. And then we could turn it down, find out where's the threshold. We could find out, okay, some people are better at math. Some people are more athletic. Some people are more musical. Some are taller. Some are shorter. Some can sense I call it the I beam if I'm talking normal English. If I'm trying to impress scientists, I call it human ocular extramission, proving that there is extramission. And so it's totally studyable. And then we could probably train people through practice to become better at sensing another person's stare.
Mm.
And we're at the sense of being stared at, which is a very common experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just, it's, you feel somebody staring at you, you turn around, you look right at them, they're looking at you, and you have a little recognition look back and forth, even though you don't know the person. And then you go, nah, carry on with your day. So that common human experience is just written off as coincidence, superstition, misinterpretation.
Mm.
And I say, well, how about if we study this scientifically instead of dismissing it?
Mm. I was,
So DID, then I have a patent which is going to expire in a few years for this I-beam detection system. But if you had an array of these special electrodes that don't have to be in direct physical contact, then you could take what I call it a whole body electromagnetic scanner. You could take a scan of somebody with DID and then ask them to switch, and the scan would dramatically change frequency and amplitude.
would their brainwaves change when they switch personality? Is that what you predict?
And whole body energy. Because I think a lot of psychiatry is not actually a brain problem, it's a whole body electromagnetic problem.
Mm.
If, you,
And
if you're around somebody who's got bipolar disorder, manic depressive, we go really, really high, really, really low, which is also on a spectrum. So you can have like little highs, little lows. Sometimes it's medium life, but when you're a psychiatrist, you meet people who are like way high manic energy, euphoria, not sleeping, talking fast. The world's the greatest place. I'm the most fantastic person. And they sleep 3 hours a night. And they're still full of energy. It's still all kinds of plans. Well, that's mania. And then depression is just the polar opposite. So when you talk to somebody with mania, it's like they're lit up. There's just energy pouring out of these guys. Their complexion's different. They're radiant, which I'm saying is not a metaphor. Where actually their electromagnetic field is way cranked up. And then when you talk to the person when they're depressed, like their complexion's all off, their energy's down, tired. So I think it's not just your brain, it's your whole body.
mm.
Which kind of makes sense because antidepressants, they act on serotonin, noradrenaline, by and large. And 90% of your body's serotonin is actually in your gut, not in your brain.
Wow.
So maybe antidepressants have their effect on your gut more than they do on your brain.
Mm.
Again,
Yeah.
it's what we could study.
Yeah. And it almost sounds, from what you said about the scientists and the automatic for, and like dismissing everything, it sounds almost like a dogmatic religion. And
That's what,
yeah. And I spoke to a neuroscientist a few weeks ago and he said how important the heart and the gut is as well. And obviously it's all connected. We seem to forget that everything is connected to each other. And I assume the heart has a big part in the producing electromagnetism because isn't it creating the pump, the electricity, right? So surely that's
well,
an important part to be studied as well.
there's a whole nerve system in your heart that will be causing your heart to pump. It's all electrically controlled. And that's how we actually measure that. So I
Mm.
s- that when you have a gut feeling, and again, this if you're in the whole body scanner, in principle, we could watch the signal. So you show somebody with PTSD a scary film, their brain goes, ah, the signal goes down to their gut goes, ah, signal goes back up to the brain. You could actually monitor that traffic.
Mm.
So that feeling is not just a metaphor.
Mm.
Actually, part of your mind is in your gut.
Mm. It
And
was all
then,
connected, right?
yeah,
It's all connected. So
yeah, for sure, there's traffic back because otherwise you wouldn't be able to feel anything. Well, long there's traffic going up to your brain. And then
yeah.
you wouldn't move if there wasn't traffic going back down.
Mm.
And the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, there's two-way communication going on all the time. Nobody just that. It's totally
Yeah. Yeah. And why is the gut overlooked then? More people talk about it now, but also why has there not been measurements that are similar to what you've said about putting someone in a brain scan or measuring the communication between these different areas. Is there any similar experiments that you've seen or studies that you've seen that maybe highlight a bit of this?
Little bits on the edge, but yeah, if you're an academic professor in the Department of Physiology and you start talking about all this stuff in too kooky a way, you don't get invited to the party, you don't get the promotion, you can't get published. So there's a lot of social mechanisms to keep that down. And so it's basically primitive tribal fear
Mm.
control system.
Why is that the case?
Why are human beings the way they are? They just So one of my books is called Why Clocks Don't Measure Time, or a critique of the religious dogma of science, which is really the religious dogma of scientists, not science itself. So I also written about that and thought about that.
Mm.
So why they're so dogmatic, I don't know, but human beings are pretty dogmatic in a lot of ways,
Mm.
about a lot of things,
Definitely. Yeah.
including dogma that, I've gotten beaten over the head for a lot of decades now about DID is stupid and bogus, not real. It's a bunch of hysterical women, a bunch of crazy therapists who just plant memories and beliefs in people's minds. So there's been a really militant anti-DID dogma, controlling academic psychiatry, controlling psychology textbooks for a long time.
But
I'm
it's,
very familiar with dogma.
yeah, I can imagine. You're drowning in it by the sounds of it. But why? Why is DID just like shit on, basically, when it's an actual clinical thing, disorder?
That's not actually an academic term, but I agree. Now, but the counter is there's actually, so people who dogmatically don't believe in and dismiss DID, they haven't read the literature. It's all attitude.
Okay.
So it's like, it's no different from, you go on Instagram and there's somebody yelling and screaming at the enemy because the enemy doesn't believe this, doesn't believe that, says this, says that. It's the same thing in academia. And now, like in the United States, especially, it's slightly more muted in Canada and Great Britain. When you look at like committee hearings in Congress or at the Senate, where there's one senator interviewing another senator or some high ranking member of government, they're like yelling at each other, talking over each other, interrupting each other. It's like a bunch of misbehaving, angry kids. So the whole flipping society is working like that, including debates about is DID one or not. So it's people who have no idea what they're talking about. They haven't read the literature. They don't know the data. So there was 5 years ago or so, a review paper, 98 different college studies on college students using standardized measures of dissociation, using standardized structured interviews, which is a whole set of standardized questions. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 different continents, multiple different languages. People who, as I mentioned earlier, they don't think they have DID. They don't say they have DID. They've never been told they have DID. Easily picked up in our 1.5 hour research interview. So general adult psychiatric inpatients around the world, 4% previously undiagnosed DID, ballpark of 15% some type of dissociative disorder.
Wow.
General population or college students, it's more like 1% DID, 10% of dissociative disorder. So we're talking like
Wow.
90 plus studies. It's not just some person's opinion. It's a very well replicated literature, which the skeptics have been already.
Yeah.
So 1%, I did the first study in Canada of how common is DID in the general, which then was MPD, in the general population. And it was a grant, and a team of undergrads went out and interviewed a random sample of people in their homes and came out 1% DID. But if you do a survey of panic disorder in the general population, you're going to find ballpark 2 or 3% of people meet criteria for panic disorder. just huge spikes of panic, at least once a month going back in time. But that doesn't mean that 1% of people out in the world have this severe, intense form of panic disorder that's overwhelming and disabling that we see clinically. They do meet criteria,
Yeah.
mild or aversion. Same with DID. Those people out in the world are not all full clinical DID, or suicidal and voices yelling and screaming and coming to in another city, who we see clinically. But they do have separate, distinct parts, different names and ages. It is linked to childhood trauma. So DID is kind of no different from any other mental disorder. There's criteria for it. There's research. It's a roughly ballpark as common as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia.
Hmm.
So why do
It's more
the
than
hospitals not want to know about that? Well, I don't know. You'd have to talk to them, and they probably don't know, and they probably couldn't tell you. It's not academic, intellectual. It's some sort of personal. This really upsets me. I can't allow this to be real. But they will never admit to any of that or talk about that because they're sensible scientists. So, yeah, I think it's a combination of basically they haven't read the literature, they don't know what they're talking about, they don't want to admit that, so they have to dismiss it. So it's kind of dismissing DID is kind of like dismissing IB.
and
Uh, they're if they're never diagnosing it, never treating it, then they're incompetent clinicians. It's like 1 out of 25 inpatients, and it's all over the place all the time. So that's before we get to partial. And that means that their teachers didn't know what they were talking about. So if their teachers didn't know what they were talking about, well, they don't know what they're talking about. Oh my God, my ego is feeling kind of shaky. And then there's just the intellectual part of it. They just don't have the information or the knowledge. And then I think there's the trauma aspect. There's this huge drive in psychiatry to ignore, minimize, downplay the role of trauma in all forms of mental illness. And DID illustrates that so powerfully. Okay, we just want to put that over there. We don't want to think about the role of trauma. And then there's the personal. I don't want to talk about, my own personal trauma. If we start talking about DID, we talk to patients, oh my God, I'll have a flashback. Or I don't want those perpetrators talking about what I did to them. I mean, those victims, because I was the perpetrator. So perpetrating on your own family members, perpetrating on your colleagues like me by trash talking them, dismissing them, leading them from the upper boys club, which also has girls in it. And then the fifth, which now starts to sound a bit kooky, is but I have a whole book about this and lots of documentation. That I'm sure all intelligence agencies around the world, the CIA, had programs in the 50s and 60s fully documented. And actually, some of the contractors went back into the Second World War, creating Manchurian candidates, which are basically experimental DID. So you can assign somebody a mission, but it's their alter personality. So if the person's caught and interrogated, they don't know nothing. Using these people artificially created in actual operations back into the Second World War, documented. So then military industrial complex doesn't really want that getting out. So when a few, like something went wrong with the machinery and a few of these people started coming to see civilian therapists and civilian therapists started talking about it in the late 80s, all of a sudden, Post-Memory Syndrome Foundation was formed. There's lawsuits, there's trash talk on documentaries. We've got to put a lid on all that, which is only like one slice of the pie. That's not the whole explanation.
is that MK Ultra?
Yeah, MK Ultra, MK Search, or Project Bluebird, Project Artichoke, Project Autumn, MK Naomi, MK Search. There's a whole bunch of them, not just MK Ultra.
Wow. What was the actual purpose of those? Could you go into a bit more detail? You mentioned it briefly, but like, what were they actually doing? Why were they doing it?
Well, they're doing several different things. So if you look at the MK Ultra contracts, there's 149 of them, and they roughly divide into three categories. One is it's just contracts to get a certain chemical that they want to use in interrogations, or basically just supply chain stuff. A third of them are through what are called cutouts, which are front organizations. So the academic gets a grant from the Human Ecology Foundation to study such and such topic. They don't know it's CIA money. And
Mm.
it says in one of the MK Ultra documents, the purpose of this is to form a relationship with this academic who might be of future interest in the agency. So it's basically a recruitment. And then there's about a third where the contractors, which is top medical schools, top universities, psychologists, psychiatrists, they're witting. So unwitting means you don't know where the money's coming from. Witting means you have top secret clearance, you know it's CIA money, you've met with CIA people, and you're doing research that they want you to be doing, which includes hypnosis, dissociation studies. So that's basically the contracts with the creators and venture candidates. And then another part of it was just, throw so much butt at the wall and see what sticks. Kind of
Mm.
pick and random in a way.
Mm. Was that like is that the LSD studies as well? Was that related?
Yeah, so there's two guys who are original board members of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which is attacking the idea and trying to basically erase it from the world. And two of those guys were Martin Warren and Louis Jolyon West, out of about 15-ish board members where it was formed in the early 90s. They're both top secret cleared MK Ultra contractors. So they had a personal interest in keeping a lid on all that. And they described in detail, in publications. And they're attending conferences with, corresponding with, co-publishing. So there's a whole net of people, a whole bunch of other guys in the network. So it's a whole network of people, including LSD researchers. So Louis Jolyon West, who was false memory guy, MK Ultra contractor, he killed an elephant at Oklahoma City Zoo by giving them too much LSD.
Wow.
Just a little slip up. Will you imagine how much
Yeah.
an elephant to kill him?
Yeah. How much? How many tabs?
Yeah, well, and so there's LSD contracts around academia and outside it, academia, all in MK Ultra related programs. And one of the guys who got LSD when he was an undergraduate at Harvard was Theodore Kaczynski, the Unabomber. And he also was in enhanced interrogation experiments done when he was an undergraduate at Harvard. And one guy who was one of the LSD contractors, he was in the Harvard system. And the guy who was running the enhanced interrogation, which basically means brainwashing experiments, also was directly connected to the victim of two different types of experimentation. For a fact, all documented. So this all reaches out into the whole history of the culture.
So interesting. How did it get leaked, or was it just released? Like the files for all of these?
It got a little bit leaked, and then documents were declassified in the 70s. A bunch of Senate committee hearings that forced the declassification. And the CIA was going, well, we don't have any documents. Everything was shredded. And then they go, oh, somebody found 7 boxes of MK Ultra documents in a warehouse somewhere. And so we get the tip of the iceberg. And that all then gets declassified. So at least in the public, anybody can get it. So I've got several big drawers of all the MK Ultra sub-projects 1 through 149.
Wow. And did anyone die as a consequence of these?
Not sure about MK Ultra, but Project Often, several people died, according to the Project Often documents.
What happened in that one?
They were overdosed with, I can't remember exactly which medications, but it's they used 1975 when there's Senate committee hearings, I think his last name was Abel, but he was the general counsel for the U.S. Army. So he's testifying at these committee hearings, and he reads it, which I have an appendix in my book one called The CIA Doctors. He released a list of around about 120 different compounds that the Army had tested on volunteers, including LSD. 120 different compounds. So
Crazy.
shoot people per study, right? So LSD, the Army says they tested it on 1,500 people. It was probably actually 4,500, but if we just go with a low estimate of 1,500 times 120 different compounds, we're talking tens or hundreds of thousands of people. This is like a big, big project. That's all documented, admitted to by the military and the CIA.
Yeah.
So CIA military mind control, that's going on and on and on for hours topic. But it's tied into DID because Manchurian candidates for a fact were operational. A guy named G.H. Estabrooks was written about that early 1940s into early 1970s. And I have correspondence back and forth between him and J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, spanning multiple decades. And I have a copy of his contract with the War Department, which was the U.S. military in the Second World War, to provide Manchurian candidates. He describes it in great explicit detail, including the hypnotic signals that are implanted to switch the person to the created identity. So that's not conspiracy theory. That's all fact.
So did they switch them? Were they able to switch their personalities?
Yeah. So he describes, as an example, the guy's all conditioned and hypnotized and programmed and has the alter personality. He brings the guy into his office, or the colonel does, and says, chat, and I want you to go to Tokyo, take these documents. And then he goes, the moon is clear. The moon is clear was the signal. Out comes the creative alter personality. He gives them the classified information. Back comes the regular person, flies over to Tokyo to deliver this set of documents. The colonel on the far end says, oh, thank you, chat. The moon is clear. The alter personality gives the classified message. The guy in Japan inserts the response, which is back to the regular person, goes back to him. He describes that in a lot of detail. And before MK Ultra, there was Project Bluebird and Artichoke in the early 50s. And that describes experiments where they they use their own secretaries sometimes, bring somebody in, hypnotize them, and get them to do a number of different types of tasks and have total amnesia for it.
Wow.
All these kind of experiments are, you don't have to read between the lines, clear, explicit in the documents.
And how can anyone be hypnotized, like legitimately and easily, by a master hypnosis or hypnotizer?
Well, master hypnotists can try, but in the hypnosis literature, which is big, well-reputed literature, it's ballpark 10 or 15% of people are highly hypnotizable. Wow. At the far end, there's people like no effect whatsoever. And then in the middle, there's people who are sort of somewhat partially. Really good hypnotic subjects can be given a post-hypnotic suggestion to do something, which is some silly little thing. Stage hypnotists do this in their performances all the time. And they do it. They have amnesia for the instruction. And then you ask them, well, why did you do that or say that? Well, I don't know, I just felt like it. So they don't have any inkling that this has been implanted in their brains. Or I remember in medical school watching a documentary, which is kind of weird because we watch this documentary and then that's it. Nobody talks about it any further. It doesn't go anywhere. But it's a documentary of a woman who's lying on her back. There's a screen. There's a guy on the head side of the screen, nurse actually, just like feeding her little pieces of orange. Meanwhile, she's having cesarean section with no anesthesia at all, just hypnosis. Her blood pressure is normal. Her pulse is normal. She's calm.
Wow.
Any pain. So, that's the most gifted subgroup. This is all, you go, okay, that person just acting like they don't feel any pain. But their pulse is normal. You try acting like that.
Yeah.
So, this is all well documented in hypnosis literature.
I'm going to ask the brain question. How does that work? Like, how do people get hypnotized?
Okay, nice talking this idea. So there's theories, and like it's obviously not the motor cortex of your brain. It's the thinking and emotion part of your brain somehow, but who knows?
Hmm. Do you know how it was discovered? Has it been with humans for a long, long time? If you're aware of that.
Well, hypnosis. So I use the example of, since I grew up in Canada, used to be called Eskimos. Now we have to use the word Inuit, which is actually the Inuit language word, but Eskimos Inuit. So there's a hunter 150 years ago. It's winter, just a rough situation when you're in the Canadian Arctic.
Yes.
He's got to feed his family. The caribou have all gone south, so they're relying on seals. And the reason they can hunt seals in the winter is there's seal holes in the ice where they come up for air. So he puts, this is fact, this is what happened. He puts 2 forked sticks on the snow, with a spear across them. He's standing there, and there's a seal or caribou or whatever bladder float in the hole. So when the seal starts to come up, the bladder goes up a little bit. So he knows, better get ready. And he stands there for hours and hours. That's 40 degrees below with the wind and on snow that's really packed in winter in the north. If you walk on it, it creaks. So he can't be moving, can't be walking. His bladder is getting more full and more full and more full. And he's got to react quickly and accurately in seconds. Try doing that without any self-hypnosis or any dissociation. You can't be, you won't lose your concentration. You can't be so antsy because your bladder's getting full or your legs are getting cramped. You got to block all that out while staying focused and alert. So hypnotizability equals the capacity to dissociate. It's been very useful for a long time. And it was formally discovered by this guy in France a couple 100 years ago. And then that's when the hypnosis literature started to emerge. And then it's the same as we've been talking about. There's the people who go, it's just suggestion. That's just a bunch of flaky people. It's not real.
Of course. Always seems to be the dogmatic, scientists or skeptics.
It's kind of the same thing as, since I mentioned pain, there's clear data that for the same amount of tissue injury, the amount of narcotic painkiller that's required by a military person is half the motor vehicle accident for a civilian with the same amount of tissue injury, because the military guy's trained. He knows why it happened. He knows it's not fatal. And now he knows he gets a break from combat. Whereas the civilian is still like that. So the amount of pain you experience is highly responsive to psychosocial context.
Why is that the case, do you think?
Because that's the way life works, right? It's like if you're a trained special forces person, some scary thing happens, your odds of getting PTSD are way lower than a civilian.
Yeah.
And then I use American football as the example. So the person who runs down the field with the ball is called the running back. So that's because he runs, and he's back because he's back behind the quarterback in the line at the beginning of the play. So that's the running back. And he runs down that field with the ball, and these people where the gigantic guys tackle him to the ground. So again, you look frozen. So I'm assuming that when you freeze up, because it doesn't freeze up on my end, the recording will be okay. So the running back is carrying the football, and he gets tackled over and over. And these guys have all kinds of injuries, and there's orthopedic surgeons on standby on the field every game. And so the question is, Okay, there's two running backs. One of them has never had a serious knee injury. In other words, already had two knee surgeries. They both get hit at the same angle by the same opposing player with the same force. Which one do you think is going to have a bigger knee injury? Well, obviously the guy with the prior
Mm,
traumas. Total common
mm,
sense. Right? And so prior trauma doesn't necessarily toughen you up. It makes you more susceptible to a PTSD response when something else happens.
mm,
I tell that story to patients, clients to normalize it. It's not because you're hysterical or flaky or weak or mentally ill. It's just the way it works.
and I've heard you on a previous podcast call PTSD. Was it bipolar? Um,
Not as a serious proposal, just to illustrate. We call PTSD bipolar trauma disorder. So
yeah.
bipolar disorder is up into mania and down into depression. So there's two poles. And PTSD is like that. And this is
Mm,
all the literature, the diagnostic criteria, and it's not controversial. There's the up pole where your sympathetic nervous system is fight, flight, hyper aroused, scared, looking for danger, pulses up, breathing fast. And then the parasympathetic system is the numb out, shut down. And PTSD has that up pole and down pole. So you're kind of okay, or you're actively numbed out and not feeling anything. Then here comes the guy with the blue hat. All of a sudden, your sympathetic nervous system erupts, and the sympathetic and parasympathetic are brakes on each other. So when one's too high, the other one tries to bring it back down. When one is too low, the other tries to bring it up. That's the way it works. And so, therefore, bipolar trauma disorder, which is fight, flight, and then freeze, will be the downpool. So then I talk about, all mammals have adrenaline systems. Some specialize in fight. You don't want to get in a fight with a grizzly bear. You get in a fight with an opossum, it'll curl up and freeze. If you try and attack a deer, it'll go into flight and run away. And so you, the person I'm talking to, well, hold on. Are you a reptile or an amphibian? I forget now. Oh, you're a mammal. Okay, since you're a mammal, this is how your body reacts. It's literally because you're a mammal. What's to do with your character? So it's educating, normalizing, destigmatizing. Okay, that's good. But now we got to do some work on this. How you will learn how to manage and process this a little better.
yeah. Mm,
So bipolar disorder in psychiatry, there's dominance of biological psychiatry, which is genes, brain chemicals, way out of proportion to reality. And it gets reinforced by these gigantic brands and so on. Um, and obviously, you can't exist without gene biology. So obviously, your brain's involved, what you're thinking and feeling. But the idea that you're just this automatic machine and the automatic machine is out of whack, therefore you have a mental illness, that dominates biological psychiatry. It's the same reductionism kind of worldview with the same
yeah.
dogma. So I try and counter that in many different ways. And one is educating about the biology of trauma, not because there's something basically wrong with you. So it's no different from getting hit by a car. Is it normal to have a broken leg? No. But it's normal if you went in that car accident.
Yeah.
So I try and change it from it is mental illness, but it's not a built-in defect. It's an injury.
Mm,
Understandable injury. And so let's get to work on it.
mm. So they weren't born that way. People with these mental illnesses, it was triggered by an experience, a trauma.
Most of the time, not all the time,
Mm,
which is the same in just medicine in general. Like most people come to see the doctor. They're not coming because they have specific genetic diseases like Huntington's chorea, but some people do have those. And it's purely genetic. There's no escape, bad luck. But
mm,
most of the day in, day out work is people with metabolic syndrome, overweight, blood, blood sugar's way up, cholesterol's way up. And so then they've got liver problems from drinking. They've got infections because some germ came in. It's mostly the interaction of the person with stuff coming in from the environment. That's 90% of the work for all branches of medicine, basically. So I just say, well, hello,
Mm,
same thing in psychiatry. Some people are tougher, some people are more vulnerable. But you take anybody and traumatize the heck out of them, you're going to have some problems. Some people will
definitely.
get problems without trauma, a small percentage. And no matter what happens, you're going to have the mental disorder. But schizophrenia, bipolar, no matter what it is, the odds of having it go way up if you have tons of trauma. That's my
Yeah.
law, which fits with all the data
Yeah. Yeah.
and fits with common sense.
Mm. That leads me to ask if you could change one thing about how mental health is understood or treated today, what would it be and why?
Well, I'd actually change more than one thing because so in Canada, there's universal health care. Great. We all have free health care. We do pay quite a lot of taxes to get that free health care, but we have the illusion that it's free. And it's true. You have free health care, whether you're employed or not employed. Okay, great. But try actually getting an appointment. So the way
Mm,
it controls healthcare costs is massive waiting lists. Unless you have a heart attack or a car wreck and you go to the emergency, then you do get immediate quality healthcare, which you get in the United States if you have good insurance. But if you're part of the large tens of millions of people who don't have healthcare insurance, you're really in bad shape in the US. So reform of just the economics and structure of the healthcare field. And, but in terms of how psychiatry operates, there'd be two things. Way downplay the role of genetics into the research money and way upplay the role of trauma, which to me is by far the most effective way to take away the stigma. Instead of it's a genetic defect, well, we're nice people, but you're not one of us. You're one of those genetic defect people. That's the actual myth. But then the message gets covered over with, oh, we're just educating you about the nature of your mental illness. But actually, when one identical twin has schizophrenia in the best designed studies, the other one only has it about 22% of the time.
wow.
So right there, that end of discussion. It can only be a little bit genetic at most. Because
Mm,
over 3/4 of the time, the other identical twin doesn't have it. So it has to be something from the environment. And then what
mm,
the pro-genetic people who get like top college appointments, top journal publications, tens of millions of dollars grants. They'll do something, different types of studies, but they'll do a genome-wide association study, which is, um, it's actually simple. It's complicated, but it's simple. So they take blood from 30,000 people literally with schizophrenia, 30,000 controls. They run it through the machine and they get the DNA out. And then, so why do they need 30,000 people? Because if they only have 1,000 people, they don't find any statistical significant difference. So when you have 30,000 people in each group, the tiniest little difference in the rate of this little mutation on this one little spot becomes statistically significant. But there's hundreds of these. They have different terminology for the defect or the abnormality or the variation in the genome. It's more frequent in schizophrenia. Um, so single nucleotide polymorphisms is one of the terms. It says in the literature and in the DSM-5 that there's hundreds of genes contributing to the risk for schizophrenia, bipolar. And also it's the same set of genes for all the different disorders. They're not genetically distinct.
mm.
And each of these genetic variations by itself contributes no more than 1% of the risk for the disorder. So how much money do you think is required to recruit from multiple centers, 30,000 people, 30,000 controls, run their blood, do all the analyses, have all the meetings? I mean, it's tens of millions of dollars, right? And then the conclusion is each of these defects at most accounts for 1% of the clinical picture. Okay, good. So, and this is going to lead to understanding the basic disease process and developing new treatments and medications. That's the sales pitch. Okay, so each of those genes contributes 1%. So to have 100%, you have to have 100 genes operating. Well, let's say it's 2%. Then you only need 50 genes out of these hundreds of genes. Okay. But it's not the same set of genes from this person to this person to this person with schizophrenia. So the other person's got like only 5 of this person's genetic defects. They've got 45 totally different. So we're going to have to analyze each person separately. And we're going to have at the pharmacy medications that we've developed that regulate each of these couple of hundred genes, but we have no idea what the jump from that genetic abnormality, this protein, the brain to the symptom. We don't know any of that. But it's okay. So there's medications that have been developed that are on the market in the United States for Alzheimer's disease that have a tiny effect on slowing down Alzheimer's. And the prescription cost is $50,000 per year.
Wow.
Even regular psychiatry drugs, when they first come on the market, they're like $800, $1,200 a month because the drug trying to recover all the money before the patent expires. So we've got 50 different drugs this person's going to take. They're going to cost anywhere from $1,000 to $50,000 a month each. And the person's actually going to have 50 pill bottles. We're actually going to take those on a regular basis, and they're not going to have too many side effects. This is completely preposterous. Big waste of money, especially when we remember that under 25% of the other identical twins have schizophrenia. When we interview the first one, and they have schizophrenia. So what do they do with these? There's a thing called a heritability estimate. Where just every week, if I'm looking around in the psychiatry literature, every week when I'm looking around in the psychiatry literature, I see heritability estimate for schizophrenia is 80%. So genome-wide associations have heritability estimates. Heritability of schizophrenia is 80%. Oh, okay. So it's almost entirely genetic disorder, which is impossible because concordance, which is how often the other twin has the disorder, is under 25% for schizophrenia. So it can't be 80% genetic. But the estimate is 80%. And the psychiatrist go, yes, sir, yes, sir. Mm-hmm. You're the important scientist. And it just gets quoted and quoted, quoted. It's a dogma. It's a slogan. What is a heritability estimate? So I don't know the percentage, but over 90% of psychiatrists that if you ask them, they can't explain exactly what it is or how it's calculated. They just, heritability estimate. It's actually, this guy named Falconer developed the little formula for plant breeding experiments. So it's a formula from plant breeding experiments that's been brought into psychiatry. And what you do is you take the concordance rate, which means in identical twins, if one twin has it, how often does the other twin have it? And then the same thing in non-identical twins. So in schizophrenia, it's going to be ballparkish, say it's 30%. And also they always exaggerate it up to 50%, but really it's under 30%. But we'll say 30% concordance, non-identical twins, 7%. So what you do is you put 30 and 7 into Falconer's formula. You get the difference, which is 23, and you multiply that by 2, and that's the heritability estimate. Well, why are we multiplying it by 2? Why don't we divide it by 2?
Yeah.
It's just a simple
Doesn't make sense. Yeah.
But okay, so then now we're at 46%. Wow, that's not very good. So they do another round of statistical procedure that has a big long name. 99% of psychiatrists have no idea what the formula is or how it works. And then they get up to like 60%. And then they do another round of bogus statistical sleight of hand to get to 80%. That's where it comes from. This is complete statistical con artist job.
Is that just to push medicine down people? Like, is that the overall incentive?
Well, not the total incentive. It's a big incentive because big pharma subsidizes psychiatry like crazy, but it's all a marketing thing. You don't market medications by saying this is a normal response to trauma. You market them by saying it's genetic brain disease, brain chemicals, medication. So it's part of a marketing package. But for the individual academic, it's, you're the big man on the top of the totem pole in academia with the big grant publication.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's your ideology.
Yeah.
So it's the religious dogma of psychiatry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Religious dogma is perpetrated by atheists.
Yeah. It's all interlinked, isn't it? And I remember learning actually that 80% heritability in sixth form psychology like 2-3 years ago for schizophrenia.
Yeah,
They're like, oh, it's all genetic.
Right. It's just stated as a fact. And it's not questioned. But nobody, confident, nobody in sixth form said, oh, here's how it's calculated. Nobody said it's really developed for plant breeding.
Yeah, no one said that.
Anything to do with mental health at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if plant breeders had come up with a formula where you divide by 2, wouldn't even use it.
Yeah. And with the 22% of identical twins, are those identical twins in the studies living separately? Like, what's the cause then?
That's another thing. So these are mostly from the 50s. There hasn't been like really good quality research because lots of identical twins grew up in the same household. So to find identical twins where you find them when they're adults now, one of them has schizophrenia, one of them doesn't. They were adopted out at birth. Whoops, kind of a big project. There's not that many of those people around.
Yeah.
So back in the 50s when it was the Danish adoption studies done in Denmark, they had adopted twins adopted out at birth, right? And so there's like 12 sets of twins or something to study. It's a tiny sample. And they find that the concordance rate is much higher than expected, even when you're adopted away at birth. So the idea is that it's in your genes and the genes go with you. So it's not the environment, it's the genes. But not distorting and not exaggerating, not joking. In the samples, there was twins who were living together till they were like 14 before they adopted away.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of them, and a lot of them like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Very few actually adopted at birth. And even of the ones who were adopted away at birth, where do people get adopted to? Their aunt and uncle a lot of the time, right? So they would go to the same picnics, the same family reunions, they live in the same neighborhood, they went to the same schools. So they weren't really separate. So the methodology is just like in the basement. It's just ridiculous. And there's lots of studies on rates of schizophrenia in family members. So if you, the individual, have schizophrenia, first of all, 90% of your relatives don't have schizophrenia. So right away, how genetic could that be? If you're full blood Caucasian, oh, incredible. Most of your relatives are Caucasian because it actually is genetic. But if all of your aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody were all Caucasian, but a bunch of your cousins weren't, first of all, we'd be going, what was the milkman doing? Like, it's impossible, right? Because your race, your hair, your color, your gender, lots of things are fully genetic. So when concordance is low, right away we know it's not very generic. If 90% of your relatives don't have it, I published a paper analyzing the eating disorder literature. So it's even more extreme. People with anorexia bulimia, 97% of their relatives don't have it. But with schizophrenia, it's clear that 1% of the population ballpark has schizophrenia. So randomly, 1% of family members should.
Yeah.
But actually, 10% of your children and siblings have schizophrenia, but only 2 or 3% of your parents.
Hmm.
So wait a minute, hold on. How does this work? Why is the rate not the same in your parents and your children? If it's genetic, it should just be passing along.
Yeah.
Well, one explanation would be, I can't remember if I said it the right way around, but having a parent with schizophrenia is going to drive you crazy more than having a child with schizophrenia.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have schizophrenia, the odds that your parents or psychosis and crazy mixed up behavior are up.
Yeah.
But if you're already 20, 30 and you have a kid who doesn't develop schizophrenia until they're 20, 30, why would that drive you crazy? It upset you. It's not good, but it's not going to cause you to have psychosis.
Mm.
Well, those numbers by themselves make you go, wait a minute, this is not just genetic.
Mm.
Then you get the bogus heritability estimates. So all the data, pile it all in a big pile, leads conclusively scientifically to it's at most only a little bit genetic.
Mm.
But there'll be some people who are, the genetic abnormality is so overwhelmingly strong that they're doomed no matter what. Well, that's going to be a relatively small percentage of total group of schizophrenia.
Mm. Then what kind of environmental and traumatic events tend to cause schizophrenia and other disorders? Is it always the same type of trauma for this
Well, there's only
every disorder?
basically with variations, but there's only certain, like so far, we don't have trauma from alien invasions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have trauma from trees exploding. But there's only a limited number of types of trauma that people experience. And back to the religious dogma of science, the types of environment, so it's environment versus gene. What in the environment is allowed to increase your rate for schizophrenia in the dogmatic literature? Season of birth, uh, obstetrical injuries, like complications of childbirth, severe infections during mother's pregnancy or early in life. So those things are allowed because that's biology. And that's it.
Really?
Yeah, in the hardcore mainstream literature. But there's 5-6 years ago, a big study in Denmark, because they have universal health care. So researchers can get the records of the entire country. And if you have bipolar disorder, your rate of childhood sexual abuse is 3 times the rate of the general population.
Wow.
If you have schizophrenia, your rate of severe bullying in childhood is like way, way, way up. And it
Mm.
increases the risk dramatically.
Yeah.
It's just all the stuff you think of. Bullying, extreme physical, emotional neglect, really crazy family dynamics, which invalidate you and gaslighting, the whole works. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse by the coach. In North America, that'd be the coach in high school. Obviously, being in combat increases your risk for PTSD. But auditory hallucinations, hearing voices, is much more common in combat veterans with PTSD than in military people who are never deployed and don't have PTSD. So it's just your basic smorgasbord of types of trauma.
Mm.
And then you look at countries in Africa, the countries in the Middle East, you're very war torn, bombs dropping out of the sky. That's a little trauma.
Mm.
Countries in Africa where a third of the adult population is HIV positive, doesn't have access to medications, and there's 12-year-olds who are now the killer, starvation. You ever listen to stories of the Lost Boys, the kids who had to walk hundreds of miles through the desert with all kinds of bad people with guns, lions literally eating them?
Really? No, I haven't. No.
Little PTSD there.
Yeah. Just a little bit. Yeah. And how come you mentioned bipolar and like sexual abuse? How come that's quite like what causes in that specific trauma? What causes a prevalence of bipolar, the mania and the
We're back to
depressive cycles?
he knows, but I mean, it somehow destabilizes your mind and your body.
Mm.
So this is just thoughts. This is not evidence. But I was thinking of writing a book, but I haven't, and I probably won't, called Bipolar Disorder: The Bad Little Girl Who Decided to Be Good.
Mm.
So I've seen this, I've talked to lots of bipolar people, uh, and sometimes it really just seems like there's something wrong with how their brains operate. You can't tie it to any childhood trauma, and you can't tie the manic episode started because this happened. But then other times it's very clear. Like somebody died, or there was a rape, there's something happened and they got depressed. And then they bump out of the depression into. So if you don't want to be depressed, where do you want to go? Well, mania is a good place to go to get away from depression. So that all makes sense, but there's not really data or research backing that. But so the bad little girl would be the sexual abuse victim who blames herself. It's all my fault. I'm no good. I don't deserve happiness. And the good girl is the happy and everybody loves you, sociable person. So that's just some thoughts. That's not like a hypothesis or a statement as such.
Mm. Um, can we quickly touch on? I don't know if they've changed the name, but borderline personality disorder. What is that?
That's a bogus term used by psychiatrists to trash talk other people who are primarily women.
Really?
Well, so lots of people, there's a much elevated rate of childhood trauma, people who meet criteria. And there's 9 criteria. So so it's basically I call it a trauma symptom checklist. You have to have 5 out of 9 of those criteria. And it has to be like long standing, like years and years. Angry outbursts, angry episodes, chronic feelings of boredom and emptiness, really severe, intense. So this is A, anger; B, boredom; C, cutting, which is physically self-damaging acts, which almost all the time is a combination of self-punishment. And when you cut on yourself, bad feelings go away. Why would that be? Well, pretty good chance some nerve signals went up to your brain and went, youch. And what does your brain do when there's a big yowie? Well, come the endorphins, right? Literally getting a shot of heroin inside your own brain.
Yeah, I never. Yeah. Wow.
Well, and then devaluation, idealization, which is all or nothing, black and white thinking. Then there's the 4 I's. And then there's dissociative paranoid symptoms, transient. But actually, dissociative symptoms are not transient. 2/3 of people with BPD, borderline personality disorder, meet full criteria for one of the dissociative disorders.
Wow.
The 4 I's are impulsivity in general, not just impulsive anger outbursts; identity disturbance, unsure who you are, shifting sense of identity; intolerance of being alone, frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, and frantic, not just I don't like this. And then instability of affect, which is feeling knocked down, up, down, out of context. Well, first of all, that looks a little bit like PTSD.
Yeah.
Getting triggered all over the place. You've all or nothing, black and white thinking that ties into what I call the problem of attachment to the perpetrator, which is you love the people who are hurting you. You hate what you love. You approach, you avoid, you approach, you avoid. I hate you, don't leave me. Because you're just a little kid. You can't go live on your own. You're dependent on your perpetrators, who are also your caretakers. So it just sets up approach, avoid, block, hate. All or nothing, black and white thinking. And it's not just thinking. It's in your heart, it's in your gut, it's in your legs. Anyway. So borderline personality disorder, I explain that when I'm talking to somebody who has the diagnosis. It really has 3 meanings. One is very commonly used meaning, which is you're a ridiculous, hysterical, attention-seeking female, smarten up. Term of insult. And it doesn't get applied to males hardly at all. compared to
Yeah.
me. And the kindly psychiatrists who are saying that tend to be middle-aged males. Random fact that has nothing to do with this. Sexual abuse of psychiatry patients by psychiatrists. What's the most common pairing? Is it for a young male psychiatrist and an 80-year-old man in a nursing home? No.
No.
Is middle-aged male psychiatrist and a hot young borderline?
Mm.
That's where a lot of the sexual misconduct is. So it's trash talk. Oh, let's just go to my office for a minute. So it's a very pathological, mixed up approach, avoid, love, hate, blame. But I wouldn't mind the following sex act if you don't mind. And I'll give you a prescription because we're such good friends, even though you're a borderline. And then if the person blows the whistle on the sexual misconduct by the psychiatrist, that's all false memories.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't expect them not borderlines. So whenever I explain that part of it, it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
nobody disputes that who's had the label because they've been trash talked and got all this negative energy. The second meeting is just that trauma symptom checklist. Well, that's what I call it, a trauma symptom checklist. Just things that are result from trauma.
Mm.
And we go through the list. You go, oh, you have 5, 6, 7 of them. So you're borderline. It's an injury, not a defect.
Yeah.
And then the third meeting is this sort of psychological theory about how your defense mechanisms operate. That's my explanation of what borderline personality disorder is. It's really, in my opinion, which is a minority opinion, another variation on other specified dissociative disorder. It's not full DID dissociative disorder because you're in this state, then you're in that state. You're behaving this way, you're behaving that way. And often, so people with borderline personality can be pretty stressful to deal with because they're not always the best behaved people, but how did they learn to be like that? Take a look at the family they grew up in.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, you poor borderline dear, you can't help it. You can get away with anything. You have to have boundaries and limits and rules, and which you have to have with everybody to have a healthy environment.
Yeah.
But we don't have in our culture currently. So then it's just, okay, understandable injury. What are we going to do here? Stand around and talk about borderline this and borderline that, or are we going to take an x-ray and put a cast on and get you to rehab? Still, this is mental injury, so it's therapy.
Yeah. I like it's an injury, not a defect. That's definitely something I've taken from this conversation. Because like you're saying about the genetics and the prescription, oh, you're born this way. You're like almost, you're different from us. You're out of the group. It's realizing that a lot of it is trauma and a way of our mammalian brain, our human brain, learning how to adapt to the environment. It makes it more understandable and less, I'd say have less indifference to the people that have suffered from that trauma.
That we sidestep into politics. So this is also an instrument of classism, sexism, paternalism, racism. There's back to MTH, there was brain electrodes were another thread in all this, all published papers, and I have the contractors and everything, where they're putting electrodes in people's brains. There's a guy named Jose Delgado, who you're on YouTube, you can find the bull who's got the electrode implanted in his brain. Well, bull's chasing around with a cape, and Jose Delgado, who's the neurosurgeon at Yale, pushes the button on the transmitter. Oops, not chasing the matador anymore. And he did this with humans or monkeys. And there's pictures of the girl. One, she's pounding on the wall. Another, she's strumming her guitar. And another, she's just blankly staring based on which button he's pushing on the transmitter box. So
Wow.
there's crazy research going on. And uh, uh, Louis John West, who was a contractor, when he was at UCLA in the Department of Psychiatry there, was a proposal to Ronald Reagan when he was the governor of California to set up a UCLA violence prevention program where he would get violent criminals, put electrodes in their brains, monitor them remotely, and if they stepped outside the restricted area, send a signal to their brain, paralyzing them so the police could pick them up.
Wow.
Another guy in this network who was at Tulane University in Louisiana published a paper where he was in this guy in this 19, I think he was. He cured him of homosexuality, which at that time was a mental disorder automatically. Which the gay lobby got rid of that over a period of decades. But you're automatically mentally ill if you're gay. So this is a gay guy, and he had a transmitter box connected to the brain electrode. When he was on his belt, if he pushed the button, it went to the sexual arousal part of his brain, and he's like, "Whoa!" He had to take the box away from him because it was pushing it like over 1,000 times a minute, an hour, make himself
Wow.
in this pre-orgasmic state. So then they could control when they pushed him into the pre-orgasmic state, and they had him watch heterosexual pornography to condition him into having sexual arousal, heterosexual. And then they brought in a prostitute, had the two of them have sex. After they've conditioned him with the pornography, they bring a prostitute in because it's perfectly ethical to bring prostitutes in to have sex with patients in your hospital, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
So they have the prostitute have sex with the guy, which he does successfully, while they're monitoring his brain waves. And they debrief the prostitute. She says, "Yeah, he did fine." So they cured him of homosexuality. This is all in a published paper. And the guy,
Wow.
the psychiatrist literally says, "Yeah, he was cured of homosexuality with only one relapse in the first 9 months."
That's
It's,
crazy.
it's ridiculous. It's kind of like funny if you just look at it as some kind of pantomime,
Yeah,
but
but it actually happened.
it actually happened. And that's just what's published.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes you think a lot of things that haven't been published and are probably going on right now or went on a decade or 2 decades ago.
Right.
Scary.
So that's
Very, very scary.
institutionalized homophobia, published by the American Psychiatric Association, published in the mainstream psychiatry literature in my lifetime. Not quite in your lifetime.
Wow. That is, wow. So they could change people's behaviors or like make them paralyzed by just pressing a button that's connected to an electrode in the brain.
Yep. And one of the experiments is
Wow.
um, there's a movie called The Day of the Dolphin, which probably still on YouTube or Netflix or somewhere, which is a theme of they've got a dolphin where the transmitter is in the brain. And this is also described in MKUltra documents. They could use a dolphin, put a bomb on the dolphin, steer him remotely to go to the mine or whatever it is, the target, the boat, and blow the boat up. This is described in the documents.
Wow.
And in Hurricane Katrina, not that long ago, there was actually an Associated Press release that was in the newspaper telling the public not to be concerned because this pod of militarized dolphins that escaped due to the flooding was not a threat to local swimmers.
Really?
Yeah, this is in the news. Like, they're just saying, "Oh, all right, well, we do have these militarized dolphins, but no risk to you." Well, and that's
What?
in the Day of the Dolphin movie. The dolphin is going to has on his back a bomb, and he just taps the bottom of the president's fishing boat, and the bomb detaches from the dolphin, and they kill the president. But it was foiled in the movie. So these things, like these are objective reality facts. And then one of Jose Delgado's papers, again, it's comical but horrible. There's a troop of monkeys and they're in a cage, and the alpha monkey is sitting there like he's the king. And all of the other monkeys are like over on far side of the cage. They're like all huddled together. And then brain electrodes in there. They put a lever inside the cage. If you press the lever, the alpha monkey just paralyzed, doesn't move. So of course the monkeys figure
Wow.
this when they're cranking that lever. And then the next photograph is the alpha monkeys huddled in the corner, and all the other guys are living life in the cage all over.
Wow.
Photographs are in the paper that's in the mainstream medical journal.
Wow.
And
So,
then do that to humans.
yeah. Yeah.
And now
Neuralink?
this is 50s, 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
How miniaturized the chips are and how satellite controlled they are now.
Wow. Scary. Scary to think about. It's almost sci-fi.
It's sci-fi, not in the partisan.
Wow. No. Do you think there's stuff like that in humans' brains about people realizing already?
Well, what are the odds that that's not the case?
Mm. Well, it's 8 billion people.
Oh, so general population, a little tricky to get somebody in the hospital and just slip an electrode in them and control them. But how about members of the military, special ops?
Would they basically be remote controlling soldiers? Or would that be the incentive to do that?
Right. Or spies or whoever is implanted in the target population.
Wow.
So do I know for a fact?
Wow,
Certainly, but what are the odds that it all just stopped?
not very high, probably.
And so one of those statements I commonly make is, well, I grew up in Canada. So, I was part of the population where we actually had air raid. This is early 60s. We actually had drills at school in case there was an air raid where we literally got under our desks at school.
Yeah. Yeah, my
Well,
dad did, yeah.
We actually lined up against the wall in the hallway. In another drill, we were let out early to walk home so we could be with our families so that we could evacuate. And then my neighborhood, the main evacuation route was one road that if there's a car parked on each side of the road, you could just barely squeeze through with your car. It was not a very wide road, right? Tens of thousands of people are going to evacuate out through this route to get outside the city. And the parents are going to wait for the kids to walk home from school. And it's 4 to 12 months between the early distant warning and the flipping bomb hits your city. Well, we practiced this. I remember this.
Yeah.
Well, the information
Crazy.
fed to the public compared to what's really going on doesn't exactly match up.
What do you think? Do you think it wasn't for air raids and stuff? Do you think it was just trying to make people conform in that example?
Trying to create the illusion that we're protecting you and you're safe. And also scaring you. So there was a scary threat out there.
Yeah. Fear mongering, full sense of security.
Saying, so we should wrap up in a little while here, but I published a series of papers in the pandemic, maybe a little nervous that somebody was going to be looking at my medical license. But one of the 2 or 3 papers were about face masks, right? So, which is complete propaganda, anti-science nonsense. So if you go before the pandemic, which is not ancient history, how many doctors inside hospitals walked around with face masks on all the time? 0. Where were the face masks? Delivery room, operating room, maybe the occasional person who was in isolation with some really dangerous disease. But doctors were walking around in hospitals without face masks all the time. You can't dispute that. It's just a fact, right? Do you think there's any germs inside those hospitals? Well, that's called nosocomial infections. I was taught about them. There's, data on how frequent and how common and how many people get them. How many people die inside hospitals, not from the disease or the illness that they went there for. So, okay, so no need to wear face masks. In early February 2020, the Surgeon General of the United States stated in public that there's no need to wear face masks in public,
Wow.
not required, which completely fits with, nobody wore face masks before, except maybe some Asian countries. 2 months later, so that was early February. We're in 2020, beginning of the pandemic. 2 months later, we're getting mandates to wear face masks in public because there's new data. There was no new data whatsoever. And so you look at the literature. First of all, you look at the physical reality of face masks. So the virus is 0.1 microns, and an aerosol is 1 or 2 microns in size. And droplets can be actually big. You might just see them, like somebody sneezes on you and it's like, So face masks will stop droplets. That's why you wear them in the OR. So your snot doesn't go on the patient and the blood doesn't splash up into you. So they work for that.
Yeah.
0.1 micron in size. What's the pore size in a typical face mask that everybody wears? 500 to 1,000 times the size of the virus.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it?
So it's near. So I compare it to, like, you're concerned that there's mice coming onto your property. So you call up the Department of Agriculture and they go, just put a stake in the ground every 40 feet. What the government's recommended. I feel safer now. It's literally that ridiculous. So there's no physical possibility that face masks are going to help, because how often in the pandemic did somebody sneeze on you or cough on you in public? It's not how it's transmitted. It's all aerosols and free particles. Okay. So there's no possibility, end of discussion, that face masks could have any effect. So then you look at the CDC recommendations, Fauci, all the medical associations, mask up. It's a moral obligation. If you don't mask up, you're going to kill granny. And the face mask will protect you from getting infected and protect other people from getting infected by you, which is totally impossible. Then we get, vaccines will protect you. If you don't get vaccinated, you're going to kill somebody else by infecting them. And you've got to wash all these surfaces. What do social distancing? There's all these mandates. Well, so I'm not anti-vaccine. That's not the point yet. I'm just focusing on face masks. If you go to the CDC website, all the medical websites, and you look at the art, and you go to the journals, which I did, get the references from the people saying mask up, it's mandated. And you look at the references, not one of those references is a randomized controlled trial of face masks in public.
Wow.
We don't reference, but there's actually a series of summary articles with a dozen-ish studies pre-COVID, so it's flu basically.
Yeah.
Demonstrating conclusively that the people with face masks and without face masks got sick at the same rate. Face masks, no protective effect whatsoever. And there was one study done during the pandemic on COVID in Denmark, 5,000 people in the study, no effect by face masks whatsoever. So all the existing evidence, every single study shows there's no effect, there's no protection. And then CDC and these other authorities don't reference any of those studies. And they just have a bunch of sort of irrelevant, unrelated references. Have nothing to do with viral transmission in public. And then what do we find out by the end of the pandemic? Oh, well, it turns out that vaccines don't reduce your risk of getting infected or transmitting the virus. They just reduce the risk of serious illness and death, which is good. But this whole protecting granny, completely bogus scare tactic. Early in the pandemic, we stopped washing surfaces all the time because the virus doesn't live on surfaces for any extended period of time. And so we went from mandated cleaning stuff to, you don't need to do that anymore. Inside the pandemic, So there's all these things. And then they gave up on reporting very early. So like,
Mm.
if you get a sexually transmitted disease, you're supposed to report to public health, right? If you go to your doctor's mandated to report. So we're going to report. We're going to do contact tracing. How are you supposed to do contact tracing when you don't have the faintest idea who you've picked it up from when you're at the supermarket? And if you picked it up from your own family, you already knew that they're already in your house.
Yeah.
So it was just months into the pandemic, they dropped contact tracing altogether, which is sort of like hiding under your desk at school.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of fear mongering and stabs in the dark, it seems.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
And,
all I have to say on that topic.
and last question, if you could give your 20-year-old self, 20-year-old Dr. Colin Ross, one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
Don't change anything. I decided, this is verified by my mother, so it's not a false memory. I age out now that I'm going to be a psychiatrist when I grow up, when I was 9 years old.
Wow.
I was just like, this is interesting. I want to study this. And not because I had personal trauma history, which wouldn't have mattered because nobody was talking about trauma anymore. So I just stay on that track. I bumped into my first MPD case by random chance as a medical student, which is a funny story by itself. So I'm a supervisor for my 8 weeks of psychiatry, and a woman comes in and she's a few steps in the story, but basically one day she goes, "Hi, Dr. Ross." And it's an 11-year-old ultra personality talking to me. That's how I bumped into it. So I asked my supervisor, okay, well, who should I talk to about this? I don't know. Literally, I don't know. There's nobody to talk to in all of Western Canada. Or what should I
Wow.
read? I don't know. Go to the library. That was the advice I got. So that's how I got onto this whole thing. So I would just carry on, keep at it.
Mm. Very good advice. Very good advice. Dr. Colin Ross, ladies and gentlemen. Colin, really appreciate this.
Most
And yeah, thank you for your time. It was really good, and really appreciate the injury versus defect as just one of the many insights from this conversation. And I love the rabbit holes and different topics we've explored. That's my favorite style of conversation. What are you currently working on now? Any new books or anything?
actually, I've finished it. Well, my most recent book is Cancel Culture. It's from a psychiatrist perspective, not being on the right, criticizing the left, or the left criticizing the right. Just how does it operate as a social phenomenon?
Mm.
And right now I'm working on completing a volume of poetry.
Mm.
Would be my 6th, I think, volume of poetry.
Wow.
So working on this and that.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, you've done so many different topics. I'd love to do a round 2 in the future to explore that cancel culture book, for example. That sounds fascinating. And yeah, where can people go if they want to find your work, your books, stuff like that?
There's a thing called the internet. It's www.rosseinse.com. Ross Institute. It's short for Ross Institute, or just search my name. Not too hard to find. And I've got all my books for sale on my website, and they're all at Amazon as well. So if you're in the British Isles, it's much cheaper for you to order through Amazon, because if you order through me, I've got to pay this, like the shipping is going to be more than the book.
Yeah.
But Amazon's got like all these discounts and volume.
Okay. Yeah. I'll leave the links to the website and Amazon stuff in the show notes. Yeah. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this.
My pleasure. Bye.
Awesome. If you've made it this far, you're likely not just a listener, you're ready to be the host. You felt that sense of intimacy and connection with our guest today, and you would like to get the same on your own show and start your own dream show. But you're worried about landing dream guests and all the complications and the mess that is often spoken about when starting your own podcast from scratch. You think starting a podcast requires a huge budget and a whole team, right? That is absolute nonsense. My pro remote podcast blueprint is the ultimate key to skipping the outdated advice and building a high quality, high impact show, even for under $100. It provides the proven strategies and AI templates that I use this day that you will be able to use to reclaim your time and creative control. And this is a strictly limited opportunity. Don't dilly-dally because there's limited spaces. We've already got one student, Rob, who's joined. That means there's only a couple more spaces to get the Promote Podcast Blueprint course half price. And you need to act very, very fast because this is a limited offer and you're very, very early. So if you want to get the early bird discount like Rob has and get the results by watching the course that goes through the exact step-by-step blueprint that I use to this day to create these episodes that you've just watched and get to the success and become Europe's fastest growing under 21 podcaster, and also join live weekly calls with me and use the AI templates and email templates that I use every single day to get the results and just get all my secrets without getting any of the mistakes and failures that I've made, then top link in the description is for you. And if you're ready to launch your own show and get personalized one-to-one help from me and copy my blueprint, which no other podcaster has shared, then I'll see you there. I'm rooting for you. Goodbye. Hope you enjoyed the episode too.